So this week in the Sacred Gathering, we're going to continue kind of our just discernment process, kind of this revisiting of our roots. Last week we talked about worship and how just worship and understanding God's presence in our lives is kind of the central thing in which we do, in which we are also inviting people into our lives and most importantly into God's life. So yeah, we gather on Sundays, but also have a lot of other activities to kind of hone our ability to see God and hear God and understand God, have hearts like God's. And then after those kind of times of gathering in which we enjoy God's presence together or individually, that needs to flow back out, right? Into, the two great commandments: love God, but then also love others. And so I think in this day and age, that can be a little more complicated because people have expectations about what Christians are up to. And I think they badly misunderstand what it is we have experienced in God and what it is we're trying to invite them into. And so, in our model, we have this kind of buffer zone between meeting people out in the world and on mission and inviting them fully into God's presence in worship. And that buffer zone, I think, is a very important one in our culture because it both is an expression of our worship, but it's also an invitation for people to kind of experience our lives together. And so for us, that buffer zone is kind of two things. It's one, service. So actually taking care of God's world and the people in it, but it's also hospitality, which, as we'll talk about, is something of a form of service as well. But there's a mutuality in both of those. In both, we both serve and are served, just like we are hospitable, invite people into our lives with the expectation that they are going to give us the gift of welcoming them into our lives as well. So we're in kind of that middle ring of our model. And again, what we will do is kind of a Lectio Divina, a divine word, a kind of meditative version of this in which we are pondering what God might have for us. So this week, as we look at that outer ring, it'll be again kind of a table discussion. So I will simply read kind of the sheets for this recording, both what serving is to us as a community, and then read some of the kind of scripture passages that have formed that in us. Then we'll look at hospitality and what that is, and then I'll kind of read those questions. And so maybe we can get a head start on it, but really we're looking forward to kind of our time together as the main event, the main talking this week. Okay, so going to Wayfarers and our kind of definition here. For us, serving is both an attitude and an action. We make ourselves available to interruption and welcome being asked for help. We cultivate a daily awareness of the needs and wants of others so we can offer ways to serve them. We also recognize the need to volunteer and work with groups fighting the major social evils of our day. And the scripture that inspires more than anything else how we approach service is John chapter 13, Jesus washing the disciples' feet. Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. When he had washed their feet and put on his outer garments and resumed his place, he said to them, "Do you understand what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, then you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example, that you also should do as I have done to you. Truly, truly, I say to you, a servant is not greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. If you know these things, blessed are you if you do them." And now a definition and a verse on hospitality. For us, hospitality is more than simply sharing meals, although it is that too. We have to share our lives, especially the messy parts. Hospitality implies mutuality. Guests get to bless us and share their lives with us too. The gospel needs to be lived. People need access to our lives to see it. And from 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 we read, "For you yourselves know, brothers, that our coming to you was not in vain. But though we had already suffered and been shamefully treated at Philippi, as you know, we had boldness in our God to declare to you the gospel of God in the midst of much conflict. For our appeal does not spring from error or impurity or any attempt to deceive, but just as we have been approved by God to be entrusted with the gospel, so we speak not to please man, but to please God who tests our hearts. For we never came with words of flattery, as you know, nor with a pretext for greed, God is witness. Nor did we seek glory from people, whether from you or from others, though we could have made demands as apostles of Christ. But we were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children. So, being affectionately desirous of you, we were ready to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own selves, because you had become very dear to us. And so the question for both those definitions and both those passages, what words or phrases stick out to you? What shimmers? What do you think God might be drawing you to learn from and ponder in those passages? And then the questions we will discuss together. Why is serving others an important part of our spiritual growth? Do you think others view you as someone who has time for them? Do people view you as someone who desires and is able to help them? What is a need in the world, your city, or your neighborhood that you care about? Do you ever volunteer or do anything about this need? How is hospitality and receiving hospitality a form of serving? How might listening well be a form of serving? And what are some other ways we can show the love of Christ beyond volunteering or donation giving? So, a lot of different directions we can take this discussion on Sunday. We will just again see where the Spirit leads us, just around the ideas of hospitality, around the ideas of serving, and just the great needs of those around us.